You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
Ingratitude. Hegseth lashes out at ingrates burying Trump's top officials in booze, based on an article by Nicole Charkichami. When power calls itself the victim, the state showed up to perform. At Meridian Hill Park, 4 senior figures from the Trump administration turned a 4th of July lead-in for about 200 National Guard members into a loyalty tableau. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Stephen Miller, Todd Blanche, and Gen. Stephen Nordhaus. Demonstrators drowned them out with booing and sirens. Hegseth answered by sneering that the noise was the sound of ingrates. That is the whole story in miniature. Power stages itself in public, gets interrupted by the public, then calls the interruption proof of moral decay. The administration was not trying to listen. It was trying to command attention, discipline an audience, and manufacture the image of patriotic order. The real actors were the ones with authority. The institutional power sat entirely with the administration officials on the stage. Hegseth speaks for the Pentagon. Miller is a senior White House enforcer. Blanche, as acting attorney general, represents the Justice Department. Nordhaus is the National Guard bureau chief. These are not symbolic figures. They are the people who shape force, law, and the language used to justify both. The demonstrators had no comparable authority. They had noise. That is why the administration's reaction matters. When power is confident, it absorbs dissent. When it is brittle, it treats dissent as contamination. Ingrates is the tell. Hegseth's insult is not just juvenile, it is politically revealing. He did not answer the protest's substance because the point was never to engage it. The point was to recast opposition as moral failure, ungrateful, blinded by ideology, unable to see law and order and common sense. That phrasing is doing several jobs at once. It flatters state violence as common sense. It turns dissent into pathology. It implies that obedience is gratitude owed to the people holding the uniforms and the titles. This is not persuasion. It is disciplinary language. The framing does the cover-up. The misleading move here is obvious. The administration presents itself as besieged by irrational protesters, when in fact the protesters are responding to the visible behavior of the state. The noise is not the problem. The political program that produced the noise is the problem. Calling opponents ingrates also launders responsibility. It shifts attention away from the actual decisions and into a melodrama of disrespect. That is how authoritarian politics often works in public. Deliberate provocation is followed by a complaint about tone. The target is not supposed to be heard. It is supposed to be managed. National Guard spectacle, not national service. The choice of audience matters. Speaking to National Guard members ahead of Independence Day was not accidental. It was a staged display of hierarchy, national myth, and military legitimacy. The administration wanted uniformed listeners under a holiday banner, with the usual patriotic symbolism doing the work of consent. But the scene instead exposed the vulnerability of that performance. When the crowd outside interrupted, the officials revealed what the event really was. Not appreciation, not unity, but ritualized power projecting itself into a public space and expecting deference. The pattern. This is the broader pattern. Governing by insult, relying on institutional prestige, and treating opposition as evidence that democracy is unruly rather than working. The state wants the uniforms, the microphones, and the flag. It does not want accountability from the people in front of it. That is why this story matters. It shows a political order that mistakes public dissent for ingratitude, because it cannot tolerate being addressed as accountable power. Once the confusion sets in, the state stops seeing citizens and starts seeing obstacles. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Raw Story for today's article. With the automated voice of Clara, thanks for listening.